Hello everyone, I hope you're having a fantastic day. Thanks so much for stopping by. Now today I'm doing the Love from Lizi June 2018 card kits. This is the 10 cards 1 kit video. So we're just going to jump in and get started with our first card. We're going to start off, I have a piece of white cardstock here. I'm going to take a photo frame die that I have in my stash and I'm going to cut out a little photo frame. Now I also cut out a strip of the mirror cardstock and I'm going to go ahead and adhere that directly to my card base. Now my card bases for all 10 cards today are white card bases. I just grabbed my cardstock that I had in my stash. I think the colors went really well with white, and so I thought I'll do white again. Next I'm going to take this pattern paper and I'm going to trim it down to where it fits in the center of my card base. Any excess that's overhanging I'm just going to trim off. Okay, now I'm going to grab a few chipboard pieces. Lizi's kit this month came with a full sheet of chipboard, and so we're going to put those to good use. And I thought this little girl would look pretty right inside the picture frame. Before we adhere her down completely, I am going to stamp the sentiment. Now I chose the sentiment that says perfect just as you are. Now I'm going to do a little stamp surgery here and I'm going to trim it into 3 different pieces. I wanted to stamp the perfect on the picture frame just to the bottom right. So I'm going to carefully remove her. And then just using some VersaFine ink, I'm going to stamp my perfect sentiment to the bottom right of my photo frame. This photo frame is actually an older one from my stash. It's from Echo Park. But okay, now we're going to go ahead and add our little girl right on the inside of our picture frame. And then I have 2 of the little pins that were in the stamps that are in the chipboard sheet. Now these are for sewing, I'm sure, but I thought they'd make cute little hair accents. So I'm going to add, and it'll add a little bit more color to her too. So I added 2 to her hair, and I think that looks going to look so fun. Okay, now I popped my little focal point up here with some foam tape, but before we adhere it, I want to stamp the rest of my sentiment. The second part of the sentiment, I want to do some heat embossing with white embossing powder. And I didn't want the sentiment to be stacked on top of each other, so I cut it again. And now that the sentiment is in 3 different pieces, there's no worries because they always fit back beautifully. So I just stamped it with VersaFine ink. I'm going to go over the top of it with my white embossing powder. And I'll go ahead and melt that. Okay, now we're ready to add our photo frame. I'm going to place it kind of a little bit wonky. And then I'm going to add my blue button. And then for the yellow button, I decided to pop that up with a foam square. And we're going to kind of layer those 2 together. But that's it for card number 1. No bells and whistles. I just want to keep it clean and simple, and I think it looked so pretty. Okay, now we're going to move along to card number 2. I want to create a frame for this cut apart. So my frame was actually going to measure, the outside will measure 4 inches by 5 1/4, and then the inside will measure 2 1/2 inches by 3 3/4. So it's going to fit my sentiment beautifully. I'm just going to cut it out with white cardstock. And then I did go ahead and adhere my Keep Calm and Make Pretty Things directly to my card base. Now I'm going to pop my frame up with some foam tape, and then that's going to go right on top of my card base. Now I thought the flowers on here was really pretty, but there was a lot of crafty little elements in the chipboard, so we're going to put those to good use. I'm going to actually cover up my little flower arrangement on the very bottom with all of these little chipboard pieces. Like this one will cover my flowers pretty good. Then I'll add the little glue and the little paint. And then last I'm going to go ahead and add this little pen. Now I thought it'd be fun to give this a little bit of shimmer using the Nuvo crystal drops that came in Lizi's kit. This is liquid mercury. And so I'm going to add a little bit to the tip of the paintbrush and do a little bit of a swirling right around my corner. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with the pen. I think this is a great way to add a little bit of shimmer to your card. And actually when it dried, my little loopies filled in. So, but it still looked pretty. I am going to go ahead and add a couple little drops over here and then up in this corner here. And that finishes off card number 2. I think that's a cute little sentiment. Okay, now we're going to move along to card number 3. Card number 3, I cut out a panel with the yellow gingham pattern paper, and just using my blending tool. I didn't add no extra ink to it. This is my yellow one. It probably has fossilized amber on there or squeezed lemonade. But I'm going to take 3 of the dies that came in Lizi's kit and cut out 3 buttons. I cut out 2 of the flower buttons and then 1 regular button. The panel that I'm using here is 4 inches by 5 1/4, so it's going to leave me a little bit of a white card base. Now, since I did cut out the flower buttons, I thought flowers need leaves, so I used the green gingham pattern paper, and I cut out a little leaf flourish with one of the dies that I had in my stash. Now, I cut out a small white panel, and I decided to pull in a sentiment that I had from my stash for this card. I chose a stamp set from Lawn Fawn called Happy, Happy, Happy. So I stamped Happy Everything, which is using VersaFine ink. And then I'm going to tape down this really fun ribbon that came in Lizi's kit this month. It's like a measuring tape, and I really like that. And score tape works great to adhere ribbon down. Now I'm going to pop up this panel with some foam tape, and that's going to go directly in the center of my card base. Now we're going to arrange our little flowers. I'm going to start off by adding a little bit of tape to my leaves. And then I'll go ahead and tape down my little buttons. And then for the larger button, I did decide to add a piece of a foam square right behind it to give that a little bit of dimension. Okay, now I have a yellow button from my stash. It was a bright yellow button, and so I'm going to layer a button on a button. So just going to stick that right in the center of the larger flower here. Now, I thought I'll add a little bit more dimension to my leaves by just using some foam squares. I'm just going to place it right behind the leaves, and then I'll actually curl the leaves up a little bit. And that gives a little bit more depth to this card. Now for bells and whistles for this card, Lizi's kit came with a sequin mix, so I just added a few of the white sequins around my panel, and that completes that card. I think that's a real fun card. I keep saying fun. Fun, fun, fun. Okay, for card number 4, I'm going to use Versamark ink, and I'm going to stamp the sentiment. This says, "Happiness looks gorgeous on you." This was part of Lizi's stamp set. It actually has 2 little hearts to the left and right. I actually wiped those off. I didn't want the hearts on here. But I used silver embossing powder, and I went ahead and melted that. Next, I wanted to use Lizi's stencil. This is made to create plaids, and I thought this would be really fun. Now, how I like to adhere stencils, especially when they're intricate like this, is using temporary adhesive. I just go over the back side of my stencil. And the nice thing about this is it's repositionable, so you can adhere it to your panel and it won't shift. And here, like you said, I got it kind of crooked here, but I'll fix that in just a minute. But I'm going to go over my stencil with my Distress Oxide ink. I'm going to start off, I'm going to straighten it, and then I'm going to start off with Picked Raspberry on the very left side, and then I'll go down the middle with Squeezed Lemonade. And then I'll go down the right side of it with some peacock feathers. Now I'm going to lift up my stencil, and then I thought, well, I'm going to do a couple more rows. So I'm going to place it back on my panel vertically, and then I'll add a little bit more color, and then I'll shift it just a little bit more and add a little bit more color. And then I'm going to change the position of my stencil to a horizontal, and then I'm going to add some peacock feathers, and then I'm going to add a little bit of squeezed lemonade and a little bit more peacock feather. And I think that turned out, my background I was really happy with, but I wasn't happy with the way my sentiment was kind of drowned out. So even I used a Swiffer cloth to kind of brighten it up a little bit, and it still didn't work. Well, it didn't look the way I wanted it to. So I decided to go in with I grabbed the circle die from my stash, and using white cardstock, I just cut out a large circle. I'm going to trim off the right side of it. And before we do any more stamping, I'm going to place this panel on my card base. Just popped it up there. And then I'll place my circle in my mini Misty. And then I'm going to stamp the sentiment again. But this time I decided just to use my VersaFine ink. So with my VersaFine, I'm going to ink it up. And then I didn't want the little hearts that was next to the sentiment. So I'm going to wipe those off. I tried wiping them off with my hand, but I was afraid that with VersaFine it would leave me a little bit of a gray heart. And so I decided to go back in with my wipey and wipe off those hearts. And it worked out great. So my sentiment again will read, "Happiness looks gorgeous on you." I think that's such a pretty sentiment. I'm just going to adhere that to my card base. And then I'm going to take 2 of the chipboard flowers. The larger cluster, I'm just going to remove the backing and adhere that to my circle. And then the smaller yellow flower, I'm going to pop up with a piece of foam tape. And we're going to kind of layer them together. Now to give this a little bit of accent, I decided to go in with, these are Nouveau Crystal Drops, but these are called Morning Dew. And so this reminds me of quite a lot like glossy accents. So I'm just going to add that to the center of my flowers. And that finishes off that card. Now for card number 5, I'm going to use this cut apart, but I'm not going to use the sentiment on it. I just wanted the flowers. So I'm going to trim it down and then take my scissors, and I'm going to just fussy cut out. I'm going to trim it. I had a little bit of an edge on there, so I just trimmed it down a little bit more. But I'm going to fussy cut around at the very top portion of these flowers. And then when I reach the end, I'm gonna do a blunt straight cut off. So the bottom portion of this panel will be blocked off, but the top will have the fussy cut out flowers. Okay, once we have that done, I'm going to add some foam tape behind here. And then this one is actually going to go on a panel. The panel that I had cut out is 3.5 inches by 4 3/4. I'm going to place that towards the bottom there. Now for my sentiment, I decided to use a die from my stash. This is a thanks die from Paper Smooches. And I'm actually going to cut out 3 white things. And then using the leftover piece from that panel or the cut apart, I'm going to cut out a blue thanks. Now I'm just going to layer all 3 of these together. This is going to give me a lot of dimension for my sentiment. And this card was clean and simple, but I really like the outcome. Next, I'm just going to add a little bit more glue and place that right up on the top left here. Lovely. Now I'm going to pop this panel up with some foam tape, and then that's going to go on my standard A2 size card base, right in the center. This is going to be a side folding card. Next time I grabbed all of my Nouveau Jewel Drops. This one here is Limoncello, and then I went in with marmalade, I believe, and then I'm going to go in with Sea Breeze and Rose Water. I just covered the center of my flowers, and that I love the clean look of this card. But that finishes off card number 5. Okay, now moving along to card number 6. I have to use this little the little Create a Girl stamp set. So I stamped the body, and then I chose for her hair. There's 2 different hairstyles, and I chose the little bun here. And I'm going to stamp that using my Memento Tuxedo Black ink. I'm going to end up coloring her in with my Copic markers, so Memento works great for that. Now I did leave a little bit of a gap, but easy fix, so I just grabbed my marker and I'm filling in the gaps that left a little bit of a space. Next I'm going to grab the little neckline. We're going to create her little shirt, and then we need to bling her up, so I decided to grab the little pearls. We're going to stamp those, and then I decided to grab the little the bud earrings, and again I'm just taking my marker to fill in those open gaps. Now I did leave the coloring in, but I sped it up really fast, so we're going to zoom through it. I sped it up 10 times, but again I just used my Copic markers, and I left the caps out for you guys in case you wanted to know the colors of the caps that I use. But she was so fun to color in and very, very easy. Now Lizi's stamp set did come with eyelashes, but there were eyelashes on the top and bottom, but I just wanted a little bit of eyelashes on her, so I took my marker and I just drew in a few little eyelashes with my marker, and I did dot her little eyes, and I think she looks fun. Okay, now I have an oval die from my stash, and so we're gonna cut her out, and then I'm also grabbing a piece of the mirror cardstock, and I'm gonna cut out an oval frame that's gonna go right around her. I just popped up the oval frame, and I'm going to place it directly on my stamped image here, and I think that looks neat. Okay, now I cut out a panel with the mirror cardstock, and then also a smaller one that will fit right on the inside with this pattern paper here. I'm just going to tape them both together, and then my stamped image is going to go right in the center. And so for the sentiment for this card, I chose Crafty Girl. I'm just going to stamp it with VersaFine ink on a piece of white cardstock. And then originally I just fishdtailed the right side, but at the end I end up fishtailing both sides. But I grabbed a silver button that I had in my stash and some white twine. I'm just going to thread it, and then I'll tie a bow. I secured it with a glue dot and just tied a bow. And then that finishes off that card. Card number 6. Now we're going to move along to card number 7. I love the rainbow pattern on this, and I love the sentiment. So what I'm going to do is create a frame. Now this frame is going to measure, well, the outside will measure 4 3/4 by 3 1/2, and then the inside is going to measure 3 3/4 by 2 1/2. I think I got those measurements right, but I'm just going to frame it. Any excess that's overhanging I'm going to trim off. Okay. Now I'm going to pop this up with some foam tape, and then that's going to go to the side for right now. Now I wanted to use the sticker sheet. I actually cut out a small white tag. I did trim it down a little bit to fit that square sticker there. To accent it a little bit, I used the orange orange eyelet, just using my Crop-A-Dile to secure it. Okay, I'm going to add my sticker. The sticker for this card, it's so cute, and it's so true. Love is a well-stocked craft room. I got a whole lot of love over here. Okay, next I'm taking some blue and white baker's twine. Now I'm going to cut off a little piece, and I wanted to use one of the charms that came in Lizi's kit. So I'm just going to thread that through, and I attached it to my tag. And then I added another piece of string. I doubled it up, and I added that to my tag as well. I just secured it to the back of my panel on the foam tape. Now I'm going to place this in the center of my panel. Lovely. Okay, now I'm going to double up my baker's twine, tie a bow, and then that's going to go on the very top portion of my tag. This was a very simple card, but I think it turned out fun. Great to give to a fellow crafter. And that's it for card number 7. No, it isn't. I added a few more sequins. Really like the white sequins that came in Lizi's mix, so I added a few white ones. But there we go. Okay, now we're going to move along to card number 8. I grabbed a piece of vellum, and using a circle die, I'm going to cut out a circle. And then I wanted to use the sewing machine cut apart. So I wanted to separate the sentiment from the pattern paper. So once I have that done, I'm going to trim down the sentiment so it's balanced on both sides. The sentiment says, so very happy, which was cute. Okay, now I also cut out a lot of frames for these 10 cards, but I guess I'm on a frame kick, but I really like the way it turned out. Now I added adhesive behind it, and then I'm going to add the vellum to my very bottom corner here. Okay, now I went ahead and added my sentiment. I'm just going to tuck it under there. I'm going to carefully lift it up and tuck it. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to flip this over, add foam tape behind here. And then before we do anything else, I wanted to add this little chipboard sewing machine. But I wanted to give this a little bit more dimension. So I took some white twine that I had in my stash. I'm going to secure it to the very back since the back of it's sticky. And then I'm going to wrap it around the thread spool on the very top. And then I'm going to go through the inside of the sewing machine with the thread and kind of loop it a couple times. And then secure it on the back, to give it kind of like a real sewing machine effect. At least, excuse me, but at least that's what my sewing machine looks like when I'm done with it. Now I wanted to add this doily here, and this is going to go directly behind my sewing machine on that vellum piece. So I just attached it using a few glue dots. And then I'm going to flip this over and add some more foam tape behind my vellum piece, just to give it a little stability. When that's done, I place that on my sewing machine background and then place that on my card base. Now I am adding a little bit of the liquid mercury to my sewing machine, and I think that looks so fun. Fun. There's my fun again. But that finishes off card number 8. Okay, now moving along to my next card. I took 2 square dies. I want to create another square frame, but I wanted to add a little bit of texture to this frame, so I'm placing it in one of my embossing folders. This has very small polka dots on it. Next, I cut out a panel with the blue gingham pattern paper, and I placed it on a white panel right behind it, kind of doing a little bit of layering here. Now next, I'm going to add this little button here. I'm going to cut out actually 2 white buttons and then one button that's the same color as my background panel there. Now I'm going to layer the 2 white buttons together, and then I'll go ahead and add my gingham blue button right on top. I just think this gives my any element a very thickness, and then also gives it a little bit of depth. Okay. Now I want to use one of the square stickers that came in Lizi's kit. I'm going to place that. This one says make pretty things. I placed that right in the center, and then I placed my frame right on top. I did pop that up with foam tape. Now this panel is going to go on in the center of my card base. Then I'm going to go ahead and add my little flower here. I'm just going to use a glue dot to secure that down. Since my frame there had texture, a glue dot's going to secure it really well. Now I wanted to use the 2 little pencils that were in the chipboard sheet. So I'm just going to kind of place them a little bit wonky on the very bottom. And then I did find almost like a wood grain button front that I had in my stash. I'm going to place again a button on a button. But instead of threading this one with some twine, I decided to go in with some dark brown twine that I had in my stash. I just doubled it up and I tied a bow, and then I'm going to secure it to my button with a glue dot. This is my cheating, my bow cheating. But that finishes off that card. I think that was very fun. Okay, now for my final card today, I decided to use this cut apart here, and using a tag die from my stash, I'm going to cut out a tag, only a portion of it, and then the leftover portion, I made sure that I didn't cut out the tag that had the little flower. I fussy cut that other blue flower out. Now for this card, I decided to use a sentiment I had in my stash. This says "Love You Bunches." I'm just going to place it in my mini Misty, and then I'm going to add VersaFine ink to it. Versamark ink, sorry. And then I did go over it with white embossing powder. I just went ahead and melted that. Okay, I did add a white eyelet to my little tag there. Next, I'm going to take this pattern paper and adhere that to the center of my card base. This is the yellow gingham pattern paper. And then I cut out a strip of the silver mirror cardstock, and then also the blue gingham pattern paper. I cut out 2 little strips. I wanted to create little banners. So I fishtailed one end, and I thought it would be easier to use my square punch. This way I get them a little bit more even. Square punches are handy. But I'm going to layer them together, and just using my tape runner, I'm going to adhere those to my card base. Next, I wanted to use another one of those little charms that came in Lizi's kit. I just threaded some white twine through it, and then I'm going to secure it to the back of my tag. And you can see here I went ahead and popped that up with foam tape. I'm going to add some more twine to the top of my tag. And then with that, I did double it up. I'm going to tie a bow on the very top of my tag. I'm going to place that on my card base. And here's where I go in and just tie the bow. I'm just going to trim the tails of my ribbon. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to secure my little charm down with a glue dot. I didn't want it to shift. Okay, now Lizi's kit came with some real pretty heart little adhesive back gems. I decided to add one directly to my little charm, and then I'm going to add a few around my card base. This is where I added a piece of foam tape behind that fussy cut flower that I fussy cut out, and I'm going to add that to my tag just for a little bit more dimension. One more heart, and that finishes off that card. So these are the 10 cards that I made today, guys. I hope this gives you some ideas. I'm not sure if Lizi's kits are still available, but if they are, I'll leave a link below in the description area for you. I hope this gives you some ideas. I wish you a fantastic day, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.